Hey, sixth graders, this is the last day of 2020 that you're going to see me. I am talking from school. It's dark out. It's early. It's about 6:40, and this is it. This is the end of the first kind of half of the school year. When we come back, it'll be 2021. Things will be looking up. So today I'm going to make it simple for anyone who's at home watching me, because the rest of you hopefully are with me in class. We're playing some games, having some fun. I'm going to read. It's going to be like a first chapters Wednesday. This is in honor of the fact that Wonder Woman 1984 is dropping. If any of you have HBO Max, you can watch it on Christmas Day, so the 25th of December. Wonder Woman Warbringer is a book by Leigh Bardugo. That's this author right here. Her story is interesting. She was born in Jerusalem, Israel. So she is Jewish by culture and by birth. And she moved to Southern California. She does have, in some side of her, in her family, she has some Spanish speaking as well. So she's got quite a story. Anyway, she's a very decorated author, and this is Wonder Woman, Warbringer. So what I want to also say is I'll keep it simple. I'm going to read. I want you to listen and then answer some questions afterwards in the discussion posts. If you are with me in class doing Zoom and some games, then this is not a requirement. If you are at home and you decide to not join us in Zoom, this is a requirement, and I expect to see this turned in, and it will be a missing if you do not show up. Just because we're going to work to the bitter end, and then we're going to earn our break. Okay, that's how we do this. Okay, here we go. Chapter 1. You do not enter a race to lose. Diana bounced lightly on her toes at the starting line, her calves taut as bowstrings, her mother's words reverberating in her ears. A noisy crowd had gathered for the wrestling matches and javelin throws that would mark the start of the Nemesian Games. But the real event was the foot race, and now the stands were buzzing with word that the Queen's daughter had entered the competition. When Hippolyta had seen Diana amid the runners clustered on the arena sands, she displayed no surprise. As was tradition, she descended from her viewing platform to wish the athletes luck in their endeavors, sharing a joke here, offering a kind word of encouragement there. She had nodded briefly to Diana, showing her no special favor, but she'd whispered so low that only her daughter could hear, "You do not enter a race to lose." Amazons lined the path that led out of the arena, already stamping their feet and chanting for the games to begin. On Diana's right, Rani flashed her a radiant smile. Good luck today. She was always kind, always gracious, and of course, always victorious. By the way, if you have seen any of the clips from Wonder Woman 1984, this literally is how the movie starts, with a race. Exactly. I might as well be reading the script. So they must have read this book, maybe? To Diana's left, Thyra snorted and shook her head. She's going to need it. Diana ignored her. She'd been looking forward to this race for weeks. A trek across the island to retrieve one of the red flags hung beneath the great dome in Bana Migdal. In a flat-out sprint, she didn't have a chance. She still hadn't come into the fullness of her Amazon strength. You will in time, her mother had promised, but her mother promised a lot of things. This race was different. It required strategy, and Diana was ready. She'd been training in secret, running sprints with Maeve and plotting a route that had rougher terrain, but was definitely a straighter shot to the western tip of the island. She hadn't exactly spied. She'd gathered intelligence on the other Amazons in the race. She was still the smallest and, of course, the youngest, but she'd shot up in the last year, and she was nearly as tall as Thyra now. I don't need luck, she told herself. I have a plan. She glanced down the row of Amazons gathered at the starting line, like troops readying for war, and amended, but a little luck wouldn't hurt either. She wanted that laurel crown. It was better than any royal circlet or tiara, an honor that couldn't be given. That had to be earned. She found Maeve's red hair and freckled face in the crowd and grinned, trying to project confidence. Maeve returned the smile and gestured with both hands as if she were tamping down the air. She mouthed the words, "Steady on." Diana rolled her eyes, but but nodded and tried to slow her breathing. She had a bad habit of coming out too fast and wasting her speed too early. Now she cleared her mind and forced herself to concentrate on the course as Tech Messa walked the line, surveying the runners, jewels glinting in her thick corona of curls, silver bands flashing on her brown arms. She was Hippolyta's closest advisor, second in rank only to the queen, and she carried herself as if her belted indigo shift wore battle armor. "Take it easy, Pixis," Tech murmured to Diana as she passed. "Wouldn't want to see you crack." Diana heard Thyra snort again, but she refused to flinch at the nickname. "You won't be smirking when I'm on the victor's podium," she promised. Tech raised her hands for silence and bowed to Hippolyta, who sat between two other members of the Amazon Council in the Royal Loge, a high platform shaded by a silken overhang dyed in the vibrant red and blue of the Queen's colors. Diana knew that was where her mother wanted her right now, seated beside her, waiting for the start of the games instead of competing. None of that would matter when she won. Hippolyta dipped her chin at the barest amount, elegant in her white tunic and riding trousers, a simple circlet resting against her forehead. She looked relaxed, at her ease, as if she might decide to leap down and join the competition at any time, but still every inch the queen. Tech addressed the athletes gathered in the arena sands. "In whose honor do you compete?" "For the glory of the Amazons," they replied in unison. "For the glory of our queen." Diana felt her heart beat harder. She'd never said the words before, not as a competitor. "To whom do we give praise each day?" Tech trumpeted. "Hera," they chorused. "Athena, Demeter, Hestia, Aphrodite, Artemis." The goddesses who had created Themyscira and gifted it to Hippolyta as a place of refuge. Tech paused, and along the line, Diana heard the whispers of other names. Oya, Durga, Freya, Mary, Yael. Names once cried out in death, the last prayers of female warriors fallen in battle, the words that had brought them to this island and given them new life as Amazons. Beside Diana, Rani murmured the names of the demon-fighting Matri, the seven mothers, and pressed the rectangular amulet she always wore to her lips. Tech raised a blood-red flag identical to those that would be waiting for the runners in Bana Migdal. "May the island guide you to just victory," she shouted. She dropped the red silk. The crowd roared. The runners surged toward the eastern arch. Like that, the race had begun. Diana and Maeve had anticipated a bottleneck, but Diana still felt a pang of frustration as runners clogged the stone throat of the tunnel. A tangle of white tunics and muscled limbs, footsteps echoing off the stone, all of them trying to get clear of the arena at once. Then they were on the road, sprinting across the island, each runner choosing her own course. You do not enter a race to lose. Diana set her pace to the rhythm of those words, bare feet slapping the packed earth of the road that would lead her through the tangle of the Sibelian woods to the island's northern coast. Ordinarily, a miles-long trek through the forest would be a slow one, hampered by fallen trees and tangles of vines so thick they had to be hacked through with a blade you didn't mind dulling. But Diana had plotted her way well. An hour after she entered the woods, she burst from the trees onto the deserted coast road. The wind lifted her hair, and salt spray lashed her face. She breathed deep, checked the position of the sun. She was going to win. Not just place, but win. She'd mapped out the course the week before with Maeve, and they'd run it twice in secret, in the gray light hours of early morning when their sisters were first rising from their beds, when the kitchen fires were still being kindled, and the only curious eyes they had to worry about belonged to anyone up early to hunt game or cast nets for the day's catch. But hunters kept to the woods and meadows farther south, and no one fished off this part of the coast. There was no good place to launch a boat, just the steep steel-colored cliffs plunging straight down to the sea, and a tiny, unwelcoming cove that could only be reached by a path so narrow you had to shuffle down sideways, back pressed to the rock. The northern shore was a gray, grim, and inhospitable, and Diana knew every inch of its secret landscape, its crags and caves, its tide pools teeming with limpets and anemones. It was a good place to be alone. The island seeks to please, her mother had told her. It was why Themyscira was forested by redwoods in some places and rubber trees in others. Why you could spend an afternoon roaming the grasslands on a scoop-necked pony and the evening atop a camel scaling a moonlit dragonback of sand dunes. They were all pieces of the lives of the Amazons had led before they came to the island, little landscapes of the heart. Diana sometimes wondered if Themyscira had called the northern coast into being just for her, so that she could challenge herself climbing on the sheer drop of its cliffs, so that she could have a place to herself when the weight of being Hippolyta's daughter got to be too much. You do not enter a race to lose. Her mother had not been issuing a general warning. Diana's losses meant something different, and they both knew it, and not only because she was a princess. Diana could almost feel Tech's knowing gaze on her, hear the mocking in her voice. Take it easy, Pixis. That was the nickname Tex had given her. Pixis, a little clay pot made to store jewels or a tincture of carmine for pinking the lips. The name was harmless, meant to tease. Always said in love, or so Tech claimed. But it stung every time. A reminder that Diana was not like the other Amazons, and never would be. Her sisters were battle-proven warriors, steel-forged from suffering and honed to greatness as they passed from life to immortality. All of them had earned their place on Themyscira. All but Diana, born of the island's soil and Hippolyta's longing for a child, fashioned from clay by her mother's hands, hollow and breakable. Take it easy, Pixis. Wouldn't want to see you crack. Diana steadied her breathing, kept her pace even. Not today, Tech. This day the laurel belongs to me. A laurel is like a wreath crown. She spared the briefest glance at the horizon, letting the sea breeze cool the sweat on her brow. Through the mist, she glimpsed the white shape of a ship. It had come close enough to the boundary that Diana could make out its sails. The craft was small, a schooner maybe? She had trouble remembering nautical details. Mainmast, mizzenmast, 1,000 names for sails and knots for rigging. It was one thing to be out in a boat, learning from Tuda, who had sailed with Illyrian pirates, but quite another to be stuck in the library at the Ephesium, staring glaze-eyed at diagrams of a brigantine or a caravel. Sometimes Diana and Maeve made a game of trying to spot ships or planes, and once they'd even seen the fat blot of a cruise ship on the horizon. But most mortals knew to steer clear of their particular corner of the Aegean. That's a sea, the Aegean Sea. It's still there. Where compasses spun and instruments suddenly refused to obey. Sometimes there are places on the planet where the magnetic circles of our planet just throw our instruments way off. Today, it looked like a storm was picking up past the mists of the boundary, and Diana was sorry she couldn't stop to watch it. The rains that came to Themyscira were tediously gentle and predictable, nothing like the threatening rumble of thunder, the shimmer of a far-off lightning strike. Hey, there's an oxymoron. Tediously gentle. Tediously means like, oh, it's the same old, like, God, it's such hard work, but gentle. Oxymoron. You ever miss storms? Diana had asked one afternoon as she and Maeve lazed on the palace's sun-soaked rooftop terrace, listening to the distant roar and clatter of a tempest. Maeve had died in the crossberry ambush, the last words on her lips a prayer to Saint Brigid of Kildare. She was new to the island by Amazon standards and came from Cork, where storms were common. No, Maeve had said in her lilting voice, I miss a good cup of tea, dancing, boys, definitely not rain. We dance, Diana protested. Maeve had just laughed. You dance differently when you know you won't live forever. Then she stretched, freckles like dense clouds of pollen on her white skin. I think I was a cat in another life because all I want is to lie around sleeping in the world's biggest sunbeam. Steady on. Diana resisted the urge to speed forward. It was hard to remember to keep something in reserve with the early morning sun on her shoulders and the wind at her back. She felt strong, but it was easy to feel strong when she was on her own. A boom sounded over the waves, a hard metallic clap like a door slamming shut. Diana's steps faltered. On the blue horizon, a billowing column of smoke rose, flames licking at its base. The schooner was on fire, its prow blown to splinters and one of its masts smashed and the sail dragging over the rails. Diana found herself slowing, but forced her stride back on pace. There was nothing she could do for the schooner. Planes crashed. Ships were wrecked upon the rocks. This was the nature of the mortal world. It was a place where disaster could happen, and often did. Human life was a tide of misery, one that never reached the island's shores. Diana focused her eyes on the path. Far, far ahead, she could see sunlight gleaming gold off the great dome at Bana Migdal. First the red flag, then the laurel crown. That was the plan. From somewhere on the island, she heard a cry. A gull, she told herself. A girl, some other voice within her insisted. Impossible! A human shout couldn't carry over such a great distance, could it? It didn't matter. There was nothing she could do. And yet her eyes strayed back to the horizon. I just want to get a better view, she told herself. I have plenty of time. I'm ahead. There was no good reason to leave the ruts of the old cart track, no logic to veering out over the rocky point. But she did it anyway. The waters near the shore were calm, clear, vibrant turquoise. The ocean beyond was something else, wild, deep well blue, a sea gone almost black. The island might seek to please her and her sisters, but the world beyond the boundary didn't concern herself with the happiness or safety of its inhabitants. Even from a distance, she could tell the schooner was sinking. But she saw no lifeboats, no distress flares, only pieces of the broken craft carried along by rolling waves. It was done. Diana rubbed her hands briskly over her arms, dispelling a sudden chill, and started making her way back to the cart track. That was a way of human life. She and Maeve had dived out by the boundary many times, swum the wrecks of airplanes and clipper ships and sleek motorboats. The salt water changed the wood, hardened it so it did not rot. Mortals were not the same. They were food for deep-sea fishes, for sharks, and for time that ate at them slowly, inevitably, whether they were on water or on land. Diana checked the sun's position again. She could be at Bana Migdal in 40 minutes, maybe less. She told her legs to move. She'd only lost a few moments. She could make up the time. Instead, she looked over her shoulder. There were stories in all the old books about women who made the mistake of looking back. On the way out of burning cities, on the way out of hell. But Diana still turned her eyes to that ship sinking in the great waves, tilting like a bird's broken wing. She measured the length of the cliff top. There were jagged rocks at the base. If she didn't leap with enough momentum, the impact would be ugly. Still, the fall wouldn't kill her. That's true of a real Amazon, she thought. Is it true for you? Well, she hoped the fall wouldn't kill her. Of course, if the fall didn't, her mother would. Diana looked once more at the wreck and pushed off, running full out, arms pumping, stride long, picking up speed, closing the distance to the cliff's edge. Stop, 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 her mind clamored. This is madness. Even if there were survivors, she could do nothing for them. To try to save them was to court exile, and there would be no exception to the rule. That means she'd be kicked out. Not even for a princess. Stop! She wasn't sure why she didn't obey. She wanted to believe it was because a hero's heart beat in her chest and demanded she answer that frightened call. But even as she launched herself off the cliff and into the empty sky, she knew part of what drew her on was the challenge of that great gray sea that did not care if she loved it. Her body cut a smooth arc through the air, arms pointing like a compass needle, directing her course. She plummeted toward the water and broke the surface in a clean plunge, ears full of sudden silence, muscles tense for the brutal impact of the rocks. None came. She shot upward, drew in a breath, and swam straight for the boundary, arms slicing through the warm water. We'll stop there. Does she get these people or not? So you can see, like, there's quite a bit of stuff in there that's figurative language. So the questions for you in the discussion section are this. Did you notice Lee Bardugo using any figurative language in the passage for today? I did. I actually saw quite a bit of it. 2, what kinds of figurative language did you notice in Lee Bardugo's writing today? So I want you to think about what you thought you heard. Again, you don't have the text, so you can't be specific. But just think about, I kind of slowed down a few times to sort of point them out, but see if you can figure it out. 3, how would you describe Bardugo's writing style if you had to describe it? There's no specific answer here, just you trying to explain it. Like, think about what she spent time on. What did Lee Bardugo spend a lot of time describing? And lastly, 4, which parts of today might be examples where Bardugo could be including little parts of her real life. What details about characters and what they say or how they act might connect to real things that have happened or shown up in Bardugo's real life? Take a guess on this. Think about the things she spent describing in detail. You can't do that unless you've seen it or unless you've experienced it. So I want you to think about this. What do you think maybe Leigh Bardugo might have experienced, even though this is a book about Amazons and immortals and gods and goddesses? There's still stuff in there that's very human. What do you think Leigh Bardugo has experienced? Okay, that's your work for today. Otherwise, I will see the rest of you. Hopefully, none of you are watching this and doing Zoom, because you don't have to, unless you want to, because this is a really good book and it's in a library. You can check it out. Hey, everyone, if this is the last thing you see, please have a very memory-filled break. Stay awesome. You're awesome. 2021 is going to be better. Take care.